With less than 1 week to go before FPL kicks off for the 25-26 season, I've taken a look at 10 of the most overlooked players in the entire FPL player base. Hey everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey, and in today's video, I'm going to be taking a look at what I consider to be some of the most overlooked FPL picks as we head towards the start of the season. I also got your input as well from social media, so do make sure you go follow me where I'll be asking a few questions and for your input over the coming game weeks. Starting off with Cody Gakpo, who was by far the most suggested of all of the overlooked players when I asked the question on those social channels. And he's a player that has been spoken about quite a lot recently. I think he's also potentially going to become a bit of a bandwagon, depending on how the Community Shield goes tomorrow. I'm recording Saturday, so if you're watching it after the Community Shield and he's just bagged a hat-trick, he's probably not going to be too overlooked anymore. He's probably going to become quite popular. But for the time being, he's not in 95% of FPL teams. At 7.5 million, I have to admit, when the game first launched, I kind of just put him to one side. I didn't really think too much of it. I think it's a competitive price, and now he's registered as a midfielder. That also might make him a little bit more interesting as well. He gets that extra point for the goal, the potential of clean sheet points as well. And the way that Liverpool have done their transfer business so far this summer suggests that they're putting a bit more faith into Cody Gakpo starting as that left winger consistently. I think the doubt or the worry would be that the transfer window's not shut. So they're still going after Alexander Isak. Obviously, that's rolling on. We don't know whether that deal is going to go through. If it does, then it's yet another very talented player in that forward line. And Gakpo might be the best of the left wingers in that entire squad. In fact, I would argue he probably is. But even without Luis Diaz there, I still couldn't guarantee that he's going to be getting 70, 80 minutes every single match. You can play Wirtz out on the left wing. Ekitike might play out there for a little bit of time as well. So there are options. Obviously, Luis Diaz going makes it a bit more obvious that Gakpo is likely to be the regular starter on the left-hand side. But it's not all about whether or not he just starts the games. It's also about whether he finishes the games or gets close to finishing the games. And we know Arne Slot does like a pre-60-minute sub as well. So I'd be happy enough recommending him as someone who is being overlooked for the time being, but just maybe a word of warning that if they start signing or continue to sign players in that forward line, then his minutes do get a little bit more shaky. However, underlying attacking data, fantastic. He's good value for money at 7.5. You can save that extra million from a Florian Wirtz and get probably a little bit more goal threat out of it as well. And in terms of the projections from Solio, the first 5 game weeks, he's expected to hit 20 points and about an XGI per 90 of 0.6. So that's more than a goal or an assist every other game. So that's very, very good for 7.5 million. So I think he is being overlooked, largely because of the doubts over the expected minutes. But let's see how he does in the Community Shield tomorrow. If he bags a hat-trick, he's going to become a lot more popular. And also, I think more importantly than whether he or not he scores loads of goals tomorrow, it'll be interesting to see what sort of minutes he gets. If I could reliably predict or felt confident that he was going to get 70 to 80 minutes every single week, I think he'd probably make it into my draft as well. For the time being, I'm happy to give him a watching brief maybe and come back to him if the minutes are proven. But I think he is largely being overlooked. So I think it's a very good shout from the community there. So another 7.5 million midfielder that I do like the look of and I think is being significantly overlooked is Anthony Gordon. At just 3.1% ownership, he is incredibly differential. And I think he ticks pretty much all of the boxes you would want in a midfielder at this price point. Now, with the transfer speculation regarding Alexander Isak, it looks very likely that Gordon is going to be playing out of position up front for Newcastle, at least for the first game week or two. And if Isak does go, he could be the nominated striker for a little while until they sign and bed in a replacement. Now, I don't think there's too many questions about whether he stays there long term. I think he'll shift back to left wing after about game week 3 or game week 4. That's absolutely fine. They're almost certain to sign someone. I think Johan Wissa is the latest recruit that they're trying to bring through the doors. But Anthony Gordon, even at left wing, is still pretty good value for money at 7.5 million. There's also a chance that he keeps penalties if Alexander Isak does go, because he will be on them in the meantime before they sign a replacement anyway. So if he buries the first couple of penalties, he might stick his hand up and say, look, I want to keep these. I'm a senior member of this squad. I deserve to have them. So you might have yourself briefly out of position for a midfielder playing as a forward on penalties. He might keep the penalties. And I think the reason he's being massively overlooked right now is because, let's face it, last season just wasn't his best work. He got 6 goals, 6 assists, but it wasn't the easiest season for him. And I don't think it represents him as a player. I think he's got a much higher ceiling than that. And now that he's fit and firing again, I expect him to make that left wing position his own once they obviously either sign a new striker or Alexander Isak beds back in. And in the meantime, is a pretty effective centre forward as well. The data isn't bad either, 0.48 XGI per 90. And the projections from Solio seem to think that he's due to tick upwards a little bit in the underlying data as well, especially in the first 5 game weeks, over a goal or an assist every other game. The first 2 fixtures aren't ideal, it must be said. And I think that is playing into why Newcastle assets in general are pretty low owned. But once Aston Villa, and I don't think Aston Villa is that bad either, by the way. Liverpool's a tough fixture, but once those 2 are out of the way, they've got Leeds and Wolves. So I think it balances back out pretty well. And although he's not easy to squeeze into your side, if you want to have a bit of short-term upside on an outer position forward who is likely to be on penalties, and then also when he goes back to left wing, he's going to have some good fixtures to deal with as well, I think he ticks quite a lot of the boxes. So don't sleep on Anthony Gordon. And if you're weighing up that favourite 7.5 million midfielder, I would definitely have him in your consideration. Everton's new signing, Dewsbury Hall, could be another interesting one that is largely being overlooked at the moment. I think that maybe that's a bit of a red herring though, because obviously until this point, he'd been in the effectively reserves at Chelsea, not getting any minutes. So he was never going to be over 1 or 2% owned anyway. That ownership will creep up a little bit. But I still don't think he's going to be in the template by any means come the game week 1 deadline. So I think he still qualifies as an overlooked player. He's also a bit of a baller as well. I've taken the data from the 23-24 season. The 24-25 season is almost irrelevant for him because he barely played any minutes in a Chelsea shirt. But at Leicester in the Championship, he was being used in a more advanced role than maybe we saw him previously to that season under Maresca. And that's the reason Maresca took him from Leicester to Chelsea in the first place, thinking he might be able to make the step up. I think Chelsea was maybe just a 1 step too far, and obviously they've got some quality players. But there's nothing to suggest that he can't operate in that number 10 role at Everton. And I think David Moyes does quite fancy him. The XG/XA data from that season in the Championship is absolutely unbelievable for a player that's just 5 million as well. That is very, very positive data. And again, he got 26 attacking returns in a Leicester shirt that season. Now, obviously, more games, lower quality opposition. So take it with a pinch of salt. I wouldn't expect that sort of output. But I think this is one that maybe the models are underestimating him a little bit. Because if he does play in that more advanced role for Everton, okay, 0.21 XGI per 90 as a projection is not great. It's not even something that I normally glance at. But I think that might be undercooking it slightly. I think that if he's in that more advanced role, we might see something around 0.3, maybe even up to 0.4 XGI per 90. And with those opening fixtures, and at that price point, you're barely spending any money on this guy. As an 8th attacker, as that 5th midfielder, if you're playing that structure with 1 benched midfielder most weeks, that being this 5 million Dewsbury Hall, I think that really kind of works. And I don't expect him to get loads of def cons or anything like that because he will be playing a more advanced role. But I do think he will get a few attacking returns at 5 million. It could be good value for money. So overlooked at the moment. It's very structure dependent when we're talking about our FPL sides, but as that 5th midfielder, especially if you're playing a 3-4-3 most weeks, I think he does tick the boxes and I think he is being overlooked. Another midfielder who I believe has been largely overlooked until recently is Lucas Paquetá. The reason he's been overlooked is fair though, because last season he wasn't really a massive factor in FPL. He obviously had reasons off the field that were affecting his play. So this season, without those reasons hanging over him, it seems like he's had a very good pre-season. West Ham fans seem to be very excited by him as well. And we know from seasons past that he is a very talented player. Man City were interested in him a couple of years ago as well. At just 6 million, if he is nailed into that starting 11 for West Ham, and I think when he's at his best, he is nailed in. He's one of their best players and technically is phenomenal in the middle of the park. He also plays fairly advanced roles for West Ham as well. I think all of those things come together to create what is a fairly overlooked FPL asset here at just 1% ownership. 99 out of 100 teams do not have him in at the moment. but you've got a very good chance of him taking penalties. He might well be taking some set pieces as well. And although the data last season isn't great, the projection models, knowing that he's going to be getting more minutes and playing in an advanced role, are suggesting that he should tick upwards a little bit this year. Now, the first 5 game weeks don't look too bad either. Sunderland in game week 1 in particular is a great opener. And then after that, it's not a terrible run of fixtures. I wouldn't say it's standout, fantastic little run, but it's also absolutely fine to hold on to a 6 million midfielder through those patch of fixtures, especially given that he should have penalties, he should have a few set pieces, and he should be nailed in. So I think the talent is there for him to be a significant factor. And when you look at the 5.5 million options in midfield, is it or could it be worth using an extra 0.5 million to get yourself a penalty taker who will have those extra avenues to points over some of the 5.5s? It's not easy because obviously budget is tight at the start of the season, but I think there is an option there. And I think he is being overlooked right now. He's another player that I would recommend taking a closer look at. So another West Ham player I wanted to quickly mention who has caught the attention of a few people, but still being largely overlooked, is Juve. Now, Juve is going to play the opposite fullback position to Wan-Bissaka, who is very popular at the moment. I think he's around 30% ownership. But Juve has his own qualities as well, so I wouldn't be disregarding him just because he's a new player to the league. He had some fantastic underlying data at his former club Slavia Prague. 0.15 XG per 90 is already very good for a fullback. Then you add in the assist threat as well, and he's got a ton of assist threat, 0.23 at his former club. And when you look at what he's been doing in pre-season, he's been getting into very advanced positions and firing in crosses at an alarming rate. So this guy is going to get forward. He is going to be creating chances for the likes of Jared Bowen, who we know is an excellent finisher, and Füllkrug at the top of the pitch, who is, again, a player who tends to overperform his underlying XG. So any chances Juve creates for him, I think there's a reasonable chance he buries them. So Füllkrug's one that also might be going overlooked, by the way. But Juve I really like at 4.5 million because it is a dead heat between him and Wan-Bissaka in terms of price. Whereas Wan-Bissaka, you've got that reliability. I think he's the safer of the two picks. You know he's going to be getting 80 to 90 minutes every week. You know his place in the starting 11 is absolutely nailed on. But Juve has also been getting very good minutes in pre-season, has looked fantastic in the final third of the pitch. So at the same price, I really don't mind taking the risk on the minutes for Juve. And most West Ham fans are absolutely loving his work already. So I think if you wanted to go against the grain and give yourself maybe the potential upside of a few more attacking returns, Juve over Wan-Bissaka might be an interesting way to play it. So now I'm going to quickly move on to 2 Crystal Palace assets. Number 1 is JeanPhilipe Mateta. A lot of requests for him in the comments of the questions that I posed. And 7.5 million, I think, is a competitive price for him, if not standout. I think if he was any cheaper, he'd be in a lot more drafts and being talked about a lot more. But 7.5 puts him in with the likes of Dominic Solanke, Chris Wood, João Pedro, some pretty popular picks, and a number of them are on penalties as well. Now, Mateta doesn't have the guarantee of penalties, but he has been known to take them in tandem with Eberechi Eze, so there's a chance that he gets them. And historically, maybe, especially towards the back end of last season, the minutes weren't amazing for Mateta, but Nketiah is out for another couple of months after suffering an injury in pre-season. So again, I think that might give Mateta a bit of an expected minute spike. And that just might make him just that little bit better as a pick. Now, the other reason he's being largely overlooked is Palace's fixtures to start the season don't look on paper like they're all that special. Chelsea, Nottingham Forest, Aston Villa, 3 defences that were really good last season, and then Sunderland, which of course is a nice home fixture for them. So don't get me wrong, I can understand why people aren't going for Mateta, but if you can look past the fixtures, or if you think that the fixtures maybe just don't impact his performance as much as maybe some other people do, I think there's an opportunity here. He runs at a goal every other game in terms of the underlying XG, and the first 5 in terms of the projections from Solio suggests he might be running a little bit hotter than that to begin with. I think in part that will be down to the Sunderland fixture, where you'd expect him to haul pretty nicely. But over the first 5, he's still expected to do fairly well as well. So he's in the mix with Chris Wood, with Solanke, with João Pedro for me. I don't think he's a standout good pick at this price, but for him to be under 10% owned, I think is a little unfair, and he is being overlooked a little bit. The other Crystal Palace asset that I think we need to talk about is Ismaila Sarr, who last season had unbelievably good underlying attacking data. 0.59 XGI per 90 for someone at this price point is really, really good value for money. Now, I think it's fair to say he was a frustrating FPL pick last season. I had him in my team. I think a lot of you must have had him as well. And that might be playing into the fact that he's not that well owned right now. Only 2.3% of the game actually have him in their teams, because at times he was a little bit annoying to own. He tended to haul in the matches you didn't expect and then blanked in the really nice home fixtures where everyone piled into him. But that's just a bit of variance. And I don't think that's a trend that we should necessarily be too tied to this season. It will all balance out over time. There could be an argument that maybe he's just a bad finisher and maybe he'll just underperform his underlying data for the majority of his career. But I don't think that's necessarily what happened last season. Yes, at times he was frustrating and underperformed, but he also cashed in big returns in the matches where maybe we didn't expect, and it all did balance out fairly well. So 15 attacking returns last season, very good underlying attacking data. And I think he's been very fairly priced at 6.5 million. Now, I've currently got Ndiaye in my team as Everton penalty taker, gets good minutes, not great attacking data though. But then I take a look at Ismaila Sarr, who has much better underlying attacking data. Even without penalties, his XG per 90 is higher. And although the opening few fixtures aren't as nice as Everton's, his data is so much better than Ndiaye's, and the ownership is lower as well, that it does tempt me and it does make me think, am I just overlooking him because he annoyed me at times last season? So I don't want to let my own internal biases put me off of a player who could actually be a really good pick. So I might need to reconsider that one. Let me know in the comments if Sarr's someone that maybe you are locking yourself away from because of what happened last season, or if you're open to owning him yet again. So one player I had a lot of requests to talk about in this video was Strand Larsson at Wolves. I think he is being overlooked to some extent as well, but he is being talked about a little bit more in content. I've seen him being talked about on social media a little bit more. So I wonder if over the next week he becomes a little bit more mainstream as a pick. 6.5 million though. I think he is a standout good pick at this price point. I've got him in my current draft. I don't really see him going anywhere as it stands. He should be on penalties. Now, that's not a guarantee. Arias, who's just signed for Wolves as a 5.5 million midfielder, has got a good penalty record. There's a possibility he takes them. I would still be relatively confident they go to Strand Larsson, considering he's the more senior member in terms of he's been there longer at least. And he is the talismanic forward now. So without Cunha in the side, and we saw that at times last season as well, by the way, Strand Larsson does stick his hand up, becomes a little bit more talismanic. All of the play just revolves around him all of a sudden. Crosses come into the box. He's always the one on the end of them. I think he's got a bit of everything about his game as well. I think he's a very good Premier League level striker. The data last season wasn't fantastic, but remember, that's without penalties, so it might tick up if he gets them. I think he probably will. And he still managed to get 14 goals from what you would expect to be something like 10 or 11 goals in terms of the underlying attacking data. So he overperformed his XG, and the models are suggesting that the first few game weeks, even with Man City in there in game week 1, which is not a nice start, he's still projected to get a goal or an assist every other game. So 0.53 XGI per 90. You'd expect from the first, let's say 8 game weeks, that would be about 4 attacking returns. I mean, this is on 5 game weeks, so 2.5 from the first 5. Which for 6.5 million is not bad whatsoever. And if you've got someone who's on penalties, then there's always the chance of a little bit of positive variance in the form of noise getting a couple of penalties in the first couple of game weeks. So Strand Larsson for me is being overlooked. I don't think I'd call him overlooked this time next week if I was trying to predict the future, because I think he is going to be talked about more and more as we get closer to the deadline. We're all trying to pinch for pennies. Those 7.5 million forwards, you might want to take some money out of that, and then Strand Larsson becomes a more interesting pick if you wanted to use that 1 million extra elsewhere. But as it stands, at time of recording, he is undoubtedly overlooked by the masses because 94% of teams do not own him right now. But I think there's quality there. I think he's a very good Premier League operator. He's going to be more talismanic at Wolves this season. He should probably be on penalties. He's in my team for a reason. So I think he is one of the overlooked players. Enzo Fernandez is a player that I wasn't massively expecting to be talking about today, but a few people recommended him to have a closer look at. Then I did. And especially on Solio, which again, I use a lot of my data through Solio these days, the projections are suggesting that he's going to be a really good pick at 6.5 million, very competitive with the likes of Ismail Assar, who we've already talked about, Declan Rice, Rodri, who's going to be out for a little while as well now, by the way, and Ndiaye too. So with all of that being said, whilst he's not an exciting pick, and I didn't immediately think of him as a great FPL option, the data suggests that he does tick along pretty well. He gets around a goal every 5 games, around an assist every 5 games. And the projections for the first 5 game weeks tally up with that pretty nicely as well. So 0.4 XGI per 90 as a projection would suggest that you'd expect him to get 2 attacking returns in the first 5 game weeks. Now, that might not sound like a lot. It might not sound particularly interesting. But actually, if you can find yourself a player at this price who gets an attacking return just under 50% of the time, that's actually really good value for money. He's also got the benefit of set pieces too, and he might get the odd defensive contribution considering the positions he does take up in that Chelsea side. He was playing a quite advanced role at times last season. I expect at times for him to be in that pivot again. So I wonder if we might see the odd game where he plays a slightly more withdrawn role and another few games where he plays a more attacking role as well, by the way. But in those more withdrawn games where the data might not look so good from an attacking point of view, he might give us a higher percentage probability of some defensive contributions. So he's a bit of a steady Eddie pick. He's not going to explode and he's not going to get 20 attacking returns. Well, I don't think he will. He might, but I don't think he's that kind of player. But what he will do, he'll get 10 to 15 attacking returns this season, which I think is absolutely fine at that price, and the odd defensive contribution as well. He's also very good on the expected minutes. So I think overall, I can understand why people have overlooked him. I've overlooked him, to be quite frank as well, but he actually tallies up really well with other people at this price point. In fact, in terms of the models, some suggest that he's right up there with the very best of them. So instinctively, it didn't really stand out off the page for me to start with, but actually, maybe he is being overlooked a little bit and one to maybe consider to start with. So I wanted to wrap up today with a big one, and that is Omar Mahrez. Now, he's got 13.6% ownership, so he's not exactly differential. But I think given the player quality, he is being overlooked a little bit. I would expect that ownership to be a bit higher, considering the upside potential of him and also the team. And it's worth also noting that a lot of Man City assets across the board are generally being overlooked. Even someone like Erling Haaland, arguably, his ownership doesn't reflect the player quality and the upside that he could give you. He's obviously incredibly explosive. He's the sort of player that can get a goal every single game throughout the entire season. So even at 14 million, he could be being overlooked because of the general structure that I see a lot of teams in. So I haven't mentioned Erling Haaland in this video completely, but let's call him the 11th man. That is also maybe the elephant in the room, not really being talked about as much as perhaps he should be. But for now, let's talk about Omar Mahrez. Now, he won't be playing the central forward role for Man City, so I think it's reasonable that he's been reclassified as a midfielder. But considering the positions he does still take up on the pitch, he still gets into relatively central pockets of space in that inside forward role next to Erling Haaland. He plays off of that central striker really well, makes runs in behind regularly, and at times last season, even with both of them playing, Mahrez was on the end of a lot of chances, and maybe not quite as many as Erling Haaland. He won't be the focal point, but he still does pick up the scraps really well. And we've seen this with Man City a fair few times over the last few seasons, where Haaland has been the central striker, but through a run of maybe 4 or 5 games at a time, they just bring someone like a Phil Foden close to him on the pitch and give him a buddy almost to play off of. I think Mahrez could be that guy. And I think that given the player quality, the underlying attacking data, and the fact that they've got decent fixtures to begin with, Mahrez is someone that even at 8.5 million could be a little bit too differential for his own good. Now, on the flip side of things, the reason that I think people are generally waiting and seeing on Man City midfielders as a rule is because there are so many good options there. So can you guarantee the minutes on any particular one of them? So Mahrez falls into that category, but I think the role he plays is slightly different. And also the player quality is so high that I would expect him to start the first 5 or 6 games. Now, we know what Pep Roulette can be like. We know rotation can strike at any minute. And at 8.5 million, it's a lot of money to be taking that kind of risk on. But I do think he's a good enough player to cement himself in that starting 11. And for the first few game weeks at least, I don't think we're going to see too much rotation either. So I would be tempted to have a flutter on him. I don't think that he's going to quite make it into my personal draft for game week 1, barring a real change of heart. But the upside is there, and I think that he is being generally overlooked by the masses because there are doubts over the minutes that we might expect from most of the Man City players. But I think he plays a slightly specialist role for that Man City 11, and I don't think it's a role that Pep's going to want to leave out of the side all that often. So look out for Marmoush. It's quite expensive. He's not massively differential compared to the other players in this video, but I've still got a good feeling about him. And the projections are suggesting that he should be running at about 0.7 XGI per 90, which is phenomenal for a player at that price point. So it might take a braver manager than me to go there, because I am just a little bit worried about him getting taken off early every now and then. But if he can cement himself and if he can get the minutes, there is plenty, in fact, bags of upside for a player of his quality. And even at this price point, when he's going up against Bruno Fernandes, Wirtz as well, I think he still does hold his own, and there could be massive upside to going with him over some of those other players at this price point. Now, as we reach the end of today's video, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell just so you don't miss out on any future content. And if there are any players that I haven't mentioned today that you feel are being overlooked, because at the end of the day, I didn't want this video to be an hour long and there are loads of other options out there, do leave a comment below with those players and I'd love to chat about them with you in the comments.